Good morning. It's Friday, February the 24th, 2017. As I continue my journey into the words and power of some of our black wordsmiths, today I'm honored to be saluting a native son who was born September 4th, 1908 in Roxie, Mississippi. Grandson of two slaves, son of a sharecropper, raised by his mother, poor, in poverty. Richard Wright. Richard Wright was a prolific writer. Richard Wright was a prolific man of provoked thought. Richard Wright was native to America but never was home in America. You see, the America that he dreamed of never existed. So he had to find his freedom in other lands. He lived in Mexico. He lived in Paris, where he died on November 28th, 1960, of a heart attack at the age of 52. But I believe that Richard Wright died from heartbreak, not from a physical ailment as much as a mental, oppressive ailment of living black in this world during a time when it was pretty dangerous to be black and vocal. So today, as I spend some time with Brother Richard Wright, I'm going to do a little bit of different thing with him because I love Richard Wright. So I'm going to do a little bit of work from his novel. One of his novels. Richard Wright wrote a number of books. He wrote, of course, Native Son. He wrote about his autobiography, Black Boy. He wrote a collection of 4 stories called Uncle Tom's Children. He wrote a nonfiction book in 1954, the year of my birth, called Black Power. He wrote White Man Listen. He wrote 2 fiction books, The Outsider and The Long Dream. He wrote poems. And in the last 2 years of his life, Richard Wright fell in love with haikus, which are the 15-syllable creations that came from Japan. And he wrote over 4,000 of these haikus in his last 2 years of life. What I want to do today is do a little bit of each so you can understand the brilliance of Richard Wright. Most of us have had experience, if you've been in high school or even in middle school, with seeing some of Richard Wright's works, and hopefully you have. If you haven't, you need to rediscover Richard Wright. First off, I'm going to read a couple of passages or excerpts from Native Son. And of course, Native Son's main character is Bigger Thomas. We live here and they live there. We black and they white. They got things and we ain't. They do things and we can't. It's just like living in jail. Half the time I feel like I'm on the outside of the world, peeping in through a knothole in the face. And that's Bigger Thomas speaking in Native Son. The thought of what he had done, the awful horror of it, the daring associated with such actions, formed for him for the first time in his fear-ridden life a barrier of protection between him and the world he feared. He had murdered and he had created a new life for himself. It was something that was all his own, and it was the first time in his life he had anything that others could not take from him. Another passage from Native Son. And finally, they keep us bottled up here like wild animals, he thought. He knew that black people could not go outside of the black belt to rent a flat. They had to live on their side of the line. No white real estate man would rent a flat to a black man other than in the sections where it had been decided that black people might live. And that's finally from Richard Wright in native song. And of course, we're talking about the city of Chicago, the Black Belt. Next up, starting with some poems from Richard Wright. I have seen black hands. I am black and I've seen black hands. Millions and millions of them. Out of the millions of bundles of wool and flannel, tiny black fingers have reached restlessly and hungrily for life, reached out for the black nipples at the black breasts of black mothers, and they've held red, green, blue, yellow, orange, white, and purple toys in the childish grips of possessions and chocolate drops, peppermint sticks, lollipops, wine balls, ice cream cones, and sugar cookies, and fingers sticking and gummy. And they've held balls and bats and gloves and marbles and jackknives and slingshots and spinning tops in the thrill of sport and play. And pennies and nickels and dimes and quarters, and sometimes on New Year's Eve, Easter, Lincoln's birthday, May Day, a brand new green dollar bill. They've held pens and rulers with maps and tablets and books and palms spotted and smeared with ink. And they've held dice and cards with half-pink flasks and cue sticks and cigars and cigarettes in the pride of new maturity. If I am black and I have seen black hands, millions and millions of them, they were tarred and awkward and calloused and grimy and covered with hangnails. And they were caught in the fast-moving belts of machines and snagged and smashed and crushed, and they jerked up and down at the throbbing machines, massing taller and taller the heaps of gold in the banks of bosses. And they piled higher and higher the steel, the iron, the lumber, the wheat, the rye, the oat, the corn, the cotton, the wool, the oil, the coal, the meat, the fruit, the glass, and the stone until there was too much to be used. And they grabbed guns and flung them on their shoulders and marched and groped in trenches and fought and killed and conquered nations who were customers for the goods black hands had made. That's a beautiful poem. Between the World and Me. One morning while in the woods, I stumbled suddenly upon a thing, stumbled unto it in a grassy clearing guarded by scaly oaks and elms, and the sooty details of the scene rose, thrusting themselves between the world and me. There was a design of white bones slumbering forgottenly upon cushions of ashes. There was a charred stump of sapling pointing a blunt finger accusingly at the sky. There were torn tree limbs, tiny veins of burnt leaves, and a scorched coil of greasy hemp. A vacant shoe, an empty tie, a ripped shirt, a lonely hat, and a pair of trousers stiff with black blood. And upon the trampled grass were buttons, dead matches, butt ends of cigars and cigarettes, peanut shells, a drained gin flask, and a whore's lipstick, scattered traces of tar, restless arrays of feathers, and the lingering smell of gasoline. And through the morning air, the sun poured yellow surprise into the eye sockets of the stony skull. And while I stood, my mind was frozen within cold pity for the life that was gone. The ground gripped my feet, and my heart was circled by the icy wall of fear. The sun dried in the sky. A night wind muttered in the grass and fumbled the leaves in the trees. The woods poured forth the hungry yelping of hounds. The darkness screamed with thirsty voices, and the witnesses rose and lived. The dry bones stirred, rattled, lifted, melting themselves into my bones. The gray ashes formed flesh firm and black, entering into my flesh. The gin flash passed from mouth to mouth. Cigars and cigarettes glowed, the whore smeared lipstick red upon her lips, and 1,000 faces swirled around me, clamoring that my life be burnt. And then they had me, stripped me, battering my teeth into my throat till I swallowed my own blood. My voice was drowned in the roar of their voices. My black wet body slipped and rolled in their faces as they bound me to the sapling. And my skin clung to the bubbling hot tar falling from me in limp patches. And the down and quills of the white feathers sank onto my raw flesh, and I moaned in my agony. Then my blood was cooled mercifully, cooled by the baptism of gasoline. And in a blaze of red I leaped to the sky as pain rose like water, boiling my limbs, panting, begging. I clutched, childlike clutched to the hot sides of death. Now I am dry bones, and my face a stony skull, staring in the yellow surprise at the sun. In his final poem, very short one, White Cap on the Bay. White caps on the bay, a broken signboard banging in the April wind. Now I'm going to read some haikus. Richard Wright wrote over 4,000 haikus between 1958 and the fatal heart attack that he had in November of 1960. He wrote these in Paris, where he had just got frustrated with American life, and he was a communist for a while. He got frustrated with the Communist Party. I think Richard Wright just simply wanted to be an equal and total man, and he was sort of shaken that he could not be that equal total man in the land of his birth, the land of his forefathers, the land that his forefathers built in Mississippi for the white man. So I'm going to be reading a haiku. A haiku, again, is 15 syllables, not 15 words, 15 syllables. I am nobody. A red sinking autumn sun took my name away. I give permission for this slow spring rain to soak the violet beds. With a twitching nose, a dog reads a telegram on a wet tree trunk. Burning autumn leaves, I yearn to make the bonfire bigger and bigger. A sleepless spring night, yearning for what I never had and for what never was. A sleepless spring night, yearning for what I never had and for what never was. That's powerful. The day was so long that even noisy sparrows fall strangely silent. Spring begins shyly with one hairpin of green grass in a flower pot. An apple blossom trembling on a sunlit branch from the weight of bees. Leaving the nest, the sparrow sinks a second, then opens its wings. Like a fish hook, the sunflower's long shadow hovers in the lake. One magnolia landed upon another in a dew-wet grass. As the sun goes down, a green melon spits open and juice trickles out. A sparrow's feather on a barb of rusty wire in the sizzling heat. Sleepy rain at night, seasoning swelling turnips with a tangy taste. Heaps of black cherries glistening with drops of rain in the evening sun. On winter's morning, the candle shows faint markings of the teeth of rats. With a twitching nose, a dog reads a telegram on a wet tree trunk. The webs of spiders sticking to my sweaty face in the dusty woods. A bloody knife blade is being licked by a cat at hog killing time. A bloody knife blade is being licked by a cat at hog killing time. In the falling snow, a laughing boy holds out his palms until they are white. Make up your mind, snail, you're halfway inside your house and halfway out. You moths must leave now, and I'm going to turn out the light and going to sleep. All right, you sparrows, the sun is set, and you can now stop your chattering. Sparrow's excrement becomes quickly powdery on sizzling pavements. And finally, the dog's violent sneeze fails to rouse a single fly on his mangy back. Richard Wright. We live here and they live there. We black and they white. They got things and we ain't. They do things and we can't. It's just like living in a jail. Half the time I feel like I'm on the outside of the world, peeping in through the foxhole in a face. The ghetto. They keep us bottled up here like wild animals, he thought. He knew that black people could not go outside of the black belt to rent a flat. They had to live on their side of the line. No white real estate man would rent a flat to a black man, other than in a section where it had been decided that black people might live. That's my salute today, this Friday, February the 24th, to Richard Wright. Have a great day and a great weekend. And just remember, in his words, my voice, our black history, need not ever be a black mystery.